on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. Thank y'all so much for being here another time. This is another edition of What is the Time, a podcast about personal sovereignty, celestial timing, and living where the getting is good. As always, I thank all of y'all for being here. I super appreciate not only my homies Pallas and Cameron, who have made it through. This is 4 quarters now. We've done a whole year of astrology forecasts, and I'm so excited to have them on the show another time. Not only am I excited to have these folks here, I'm excited to have you, the listener, the viewer, here as well. Thank you so much for rocking with us this whole year. Thanks for rocking with us this whole time before this and to the time in the future. We are very excited to have all of the different things that we have going on here. We have been working super, super hard in order to make beautiful things happen in the world. And thank you so much for showing up to participate in that. It is very glorious for us to be here together. As always, if you want to help out, you can check out my Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, which is all ZamboniFunk. You can go to ZamboniFunk.com. You can get a reading there. You can find music there. You can get merch there. There's a bunch of beautiful artwork that I'm super proud of that is all available there. You can find the other podcasts there, etc., etc. There's so much that we've got going on here. And so today we have the next quarterly forecast. We're going to talk about the summertime here in the Northern Hemisphere. We are going to talk about, we've got big things coming up. We got big retrogrades going on. We got hot girl summer with Venus and Leo happening out here. We've got big spicy Virgo business happening with a Mercury retrograde and an opposition, our first opposition to Saturn in Pisces. A very exciting time. Thank you all so much for being here. And what's up, Pallas and Cameron? How y'all doing today?
I feel interesting. This is the first time during this, during the quarterlies that I feel like a certain type of intensity. So I'm really interested in like how this like comes forth with like talking about everything in this state of being. But I feel well overall. Yeah.
Do you feel this intensity around the subject matter today?
Oh, I think it's more internal. So like, yeah, it's more internal, just my experience right now in this present moment, since I'm talking about how I feel right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of intensity happening around me, which we can get into a little bit of that as like a Venus retrograde example at some point, but yeah, pretty good. Really though, like I think I just have like a lot going on. Venus retrograde is always like a busy time for me in like a good way. And a lot of I generally feel very like exterior focused, which is interesting. And yeah, my Leo placements are just all lit up and happy to be here. Yeah.
Word. Well, like a good Leo placement, let's get this show on the road. So Cameron, I know you love to talk about the ingress charts, and the last ingress we had was an Aries ingress, and as I recall, it was like at least in Washington, D.C., which is where we tend to cast the charts here. Then there was a bunch of mutable focus and some things like this. And so we're moving into the Cancer ingress now, the summer solstice. And so where do you see us being in the kind of like wider scope of time right now?
Yeah, like on a really, really, really mundane level, which I'm still like sinking myself into, coming from like more evolutionary astrology background and being psychological and soul-based. I like saw a lot of things. I like learned a lot throughout this last quarter because the things that I was looking at with Virgo being like the ascendant and the ruler of that being in the 8th house in the chart for the United States. And we still cast United States as like the center of the world currently, but that's probably going to change in a few years here. And that's something that was like really interesting that I was looking at because with the financial situation that's happening in the United States, it's like the people were like feeling like the money was tight, and that's just something that's going on in general. But what I really noticed was how the second house, like Venus being so strong in the Aries ingress chart, and be ruling the second house and the third house. And so just seeing like a lot of like foreign nations communicating with each other and them getting their money right, the things happening with the BRICS system. I don't know how much people know about that, but like a lot of countries are like coming together, and it's like away from like kind of what we have going on here in the United States a little bit. And so I just thought that was like really interesting, just seeing as, the ninth house, like Venus being in that ninth house, and it having to do with finances of the planet in general, and casting it from the United States, and that having to do with like the money situation, but like other people or foreign countries having like a heightened emphasis on their money. And then also just like there's been a lot of things going on with Africa, and just like the relationship with Saturn being on the descendant, or the most angular planet. It was like bad relationships going on, and specifically with Africa basically telling the United States to go home and shut the hell up and stop coming over here and talking to us like this, basically. And so I thought that was like really interesting things. I mean, of course, there's so many other things going on, but that's the thing that I will highlight that's going on in a very broad, mundane perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, to my mind, this really speaks to what you said there, is that like the United States is not about to be the center of the world anymore, right? And so that looks like such major flux around things that had been stable for a long time. And we've been seeing Uranus really prominent for a long period of time here. And we've had eclipses on that Uranus, and and opposite to that Uranus, we've seen, there's been a lot of stuff. We had that Saturn and Aquarius square to Uranus and Taurus for a long time. And so there's this like major shift in power dynamics and in the sort of basic structure of things that has been super important here. And speaking of power dynamics, then also from this last quarter, we have had Pluto in Aquarius for the first time in 200 something years or something like this, right? And so as Pluto moved into Aquarius, didn't make it very far, just made it to the very first degree, just only 0 degrees of Aquarius. Pluto had just hanging there out right at that first little bit. But we've seen major power changes in that much time. And so it's just been a little glimpse here, because now at the time of this recording and for the rest of this quarter and beyond even, then we've got Pluto back in Capricorn here. Now, Pallas, I think you had some thoughts and feelings about that. Is that right?
It's like it's not over yet. That's like the big, that's the big feeling with Pluto and Capricorn. I feel like we're seeing that from the most micro to the most macro level with it. It's like, yeah, it just moved in to Aquarius in March, and then it just moved back out. And then we get more of it from back in, what was it, January, right? 2024, we're back in Aquarius again, and then it dips back out, and then we have the last little bit at the end of 2024. So it's like, we're hovering back and forth. And if we got a little glimpse of what's coming, then we get like a major taste, and then we're there. And so it's like wrapping up what's going on in Pluto and Capricorn on every one of those levels, right? And I feel like these shifts we're talking about of power and of currency, right? These shifts that are happening, it's like we're just at the beginning, and it's we'll still get a whole lot of information of what Pluto and Aquarius is going to bring us starting in January of next year. We get a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and even just thinking about the age of air, tying that in, and with the Saturn Jupiter conjunction, that's just like, even though Pluto seems like it just stepped in, but it's like also it like landed on top of that Saturn Jupiter conjunction, and so like it still like made these big waves that are going to actually be like a new change that I project is going to be more stabilized throughout the process of Pluto going through Aquarius. So yeah, it's super highlighted there for sure. And yeah, it wasn't done yet with Capricorn. And so that's something that I've been finding in sessions with people. It's like they feel like they're like moving forward in this like way that feels empowering, and they're starting to understand things in a different manner. Or even sometimes people feel like they were like liberating themselves from systems that they feel like were not helpful to them. And now like I'm starting to see some people backtrack a little bit and feel like kind of like honestly like a little bit defeated about, oh, well, actually I do need to go back and get a job, even though I was like starting to flourish with my like creative projects. But I do need to take a step back and like restructure this for myself so that I can remove myself from these systems and like move forward on my own. And so, yeah, I just would invite everybody to feel into that, because it's one thing to think about getting out of a system, but it's another thing to actually take the responsibility it takes to actually create a system for yourself so you can remove another system and move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And how much we need other people in order to survive in the new systems. I feel like it's also a theme I'm seeing coming up. Yeah, it's like and we'll get into more of this with the Venus retrograde stuff, but there's a way that this like Pluto move into Aquarius was very like, okay, like what is now expected of you? Like what are you being like what are you being tasked with in the Pluto and Aquarius world, right? And then with Saturn's been there honing us to like be able to be that, right? But then without Saturn there, Uranus is still in Taurus and in a Taurus house, and just in Taurus generally where we can see it. And it's like not held back by Saturn anymore. And instead Pluto's starting to duck in there. And so it's like all this Leo stuff right now, like Venus moved into Leo and like hit off that 0 degree with Pluto still just there, right? And that was like, that was so activating for folks. Like people were coming into sessions just being like, and now this is what needs to happen. But yet exactly, people have to go back. They're like retracing their steps kind of in order to like move forward yet again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that reminds me of it feels like there's a sense of profundity right now. Like things are just really profound, really like big things, like things, there's a sense of weight or gravity that I feel like clients are showing up with all the time. Like it feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders a little bit or something like this. And I feel like that is because we're in this major epochal shift where we're still transitioning out of the era of Earth and into the era of air. This is a 200-year cycle. So it's like this sort of thing doesn't happen in the one night or something like this, right? And so if we're thinking on a geological time scale, then the life of a human is very short, right? So we are in an overnight, we're switching things overnight, but it's on that geological overnight, right? And so we're in this point where we're really shifting things and finding ways to do it. And then so in doing that, we have to navigate what is my relationship to the whole and what is the whole's relationship to me? Where are those things the same? Where are they different? How do we navigate that relationship? I feel like that's been really, really prominent in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. And when you can focus on that, it actually takes that like sense of heaviness and kind of disperses it out a little bit and makes it more relational rather than like me holding all of that tension because I want to change something and the system is changing and how, it's so dynamic. Even like my hands going back and forth, it's like, even if I have a weight on my shoulder, if I'm leaning to and fro, it like makes it seem lighter instead of me just like hunkering down with all that weight. So that's a great point. And yeah, I do see that happening a lot.
Yeah. And this is a piece, I think we talked about this last time about like how Saturn's been Saturning, right? For like years. And like now Saturn's not really Saturning or is doing it in like a very different way. And how it's like, so that burden, right, that people are feeling and that I'm feeling, that everybody's feeling, right? And that like needing to make it more collective in order to disperse it. It's like, that's so Pisces. Like that's so like Saturn trying to Saturn in Pisces. And like, yeah, people needing to sort of ramp up their own Saturn right? And call upon their own Saturn rather than just relying, like outsourcing it to Saturn in the sky, feels like something we mentioned last time too. And that having a connection to like people, and this is Pluto changing signs, right? Is then Pluto, like, but both Saturn having this relationship with control. And so it's like people trying to like force things or control things in order to like maintain a sort of steady state, when it's like that's the fluidity is actually how to maintain, like the fluidity is part of the key to stability with Saturn and Pisces. Big change.
1,000%. Yeah.
You know, that I want to move on here, but that really makes me think of this thing that I've been working out for a long time. I've been trying to figure it out since Uranus moved into Taurus. So back from 2018, I've been looking at Uranus and Taurus and thinking about like, okay, so how do we manage major dynamic spur of the moment shifts happening in the fixed Earth sign? Like, how do we navigate that, and how do we find a sense of balance or homeostasis there in the place that like a body likes to live in, right? How do we make this work? And so the way that I have thought about with that is through rhythm. And so there's something that is dynamic about that, right? Like coming back to the way that you were moving your hands earlier, Cameron, or this, you know, like the fluidity that you're talking about here. And Saturn in Pisces is really good for, we've seen some like great music and artistic stuff come out under Saturn in Pisces, right? And so there's something like deeply creative and dynamic that can maybe find its sense of center or wholeness or something like this, or health or something, in finding that space where like things are moving around. It's a little bit like Miles Davis said one time that like if you hit a wrong note, it's the next note that makes it sound wrong. So if you hit a wrong note, then you have an opportunity to change your whole harmonic form. This is true if you're dancing as well, right? Maybe you tripped, or maybe now you're breakdancing, right? So you've got options here, and I think that is a really good way for us to think into ways to navigate this feeling of like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, or the weight of the world is on everybody's shoulders, which is almost more terrifying. And so there's like, I feel like there's something here, something danceable makes sense to me as a way to navigate that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so loud in my experience, because I have been like dancing so much lately. And
I know, I've been watching your Instagram. I love those dance videos.
Yeah, and the other day I did trip actually in one of the videos, like I was doing, like actually it was one day I would trip like 4 times in 4 different videos. And I was like, I'm still gonna post this. And when I actually posted it without like the fixation on what it should be or how it should be constructed or look like, I realized like the next note was like, it made it like just flow as if like you couldn't even tell that I tripped. It was just the construct or the rigidity that I had around it. So that's like, the way you said that just like illuminated that situation so clearly. So that's so perfect.
I'm thinking about like Scorpio in the context of what we're talking about here, because it's like when we're thinking of this fixed Earth sign, I'm like, well, how do we balance the Uranus and Taurus, right? It's like I immediately start thinking about Scorpio, and I start thinking about like all of us Pluto and Scorpio generations like starting to head into our Pluto square, right? Because that's what this first hint of Pluto and Aquarius is. It's our first little taste of what that is going to look like, which is a lot of this control, burden, responsibility stuff. But to have like, I'm thinking about like lava, right? And it's like if we're thinking about these like major tectonic shifts, and it's like what is the Earth's way of dealing with that? And I mean there's like mountains, right? But then we end up with volcanoes, and we end up with like lava. And so it's like what, as like kind of like a Mars Scorpio feeling and the way it's so hot and then it cools, right? And this thinking about these almost like temperature shifts, like if we're thinking about like tripping and turning it into like another piece, it's like, what is that if we think about it from like a matter, temperature, I don't know, like what is the fluidity in that, and how does that bring us back to that like more sensual Taurus state experience? Like how do we recover from that? Like where's the new like homeostasis after a volcano?
Yeah.
That to me feels like a really good transition into the Cancer ingress chart, because one of the things that I noticed about that chart is that, so as the sun moves into Cancer and brings us into this new seasonal moment, then we've got the moon in Leo with both Venus and Mars. And so if we're thinking about lava, with something that stays hot for a long time, and if we're thinking about the kind of, I think what you were getting at there with the volcanic stuff is like there's all of this dynamic shifting that has to sometimes be expressed in this like hot and kind of volatile sort of way, right? And so what we see here at this ingress, the solstice ingress, is that the moon even, and so the moon is also ruling the ingress, right, in Cancer. Then that moon is there with Venus and Mars, who are in Leo and who are both approaching a square to Uranus in Taurus as well. And so all of this sort of like heat and dynamism seems like it wants to be a focal point for this ingress or for this entire season that we're looking into here. It looks a little wartime to me.
Yeah.
With both Venus and Mars there, both being war planets, and Venus is getting ready to do this retrograde and everything.
Yeah, it does feel that way. And even like I was saying before with the Aries ingress chart, just like having Saturn so angular compared to like everything else also just giving the sense of like problems in general. And that Saturn just made it to the exact descendant of the Aries ingress descendant. And so, yeah, just trouble with others is like really loud there. So we could look at that, of course, like as the United States, but on less mundane level, just like thinking about how like I have had rigid structures in my mind and how some of those things need to start going away so that I don't have trouble with others, and how that can create issues, of course, with this other signature for like wartime with the Mars and the Venus, it's just making me thinking about that a lot. And then also from my medical astrology mind is seeing that Saturn moon in conjunction and just the crises that can create. And so something with the moon in the 12th house for this next quarter, something I would invite people into is just being mindful of how much you're tapping into the collective information in the field, and making sure that if there is wartime or the wartime that's happening around you in your environment, that you're not like taking that on too much, because it could just like overwhelm us a little bit there. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of like how fire season has already started, and it's like I'm up in the East Coast and like we just got all that smoke from the Quebec forest fires. And I mean, Quebec burns like every spring and summer, right? But it was like a fluke of weather that it all came down here like right at once. And like, I don't know, just with the 12th house emphasis too. I mean, I'm not a mundane expert, but I'm thinking about like how like those in the prison system are recruited as forest fire fighters. And that's like, I don't know, it's just it always comes up in the summer. And that feels like I don't know. Yeah, it's just something I'm thinking about, and like how bad they're going to be in the West has yet to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely looks hot and fiery. It's a hot summer for sure. One thing that thinking about the heat and the volcanic activity and the fires and the potential for war and conflict and stuff like this, and also seeing this square to Uranus as well, right? The word that just came into my head is beef. Like there's a sense of like there, and Leo is so proud, right? And that's one of the things that is both strength and weakness for Leo, is that like it's able to be out here and shine and do the damn thing, and here we are, and the sun is at its highest point. It's the zenith of the sun is like super high in the sky on the Cancer ingress and all this kind of thing, right? Super splashy, noticeable, but then also very proud, and in the event of some kind of slight, then now we got beef and we got to deal with this. And especially if we've got like mean girl syndrome happening in the wider geopolitical situation, then this feels like a real moment where some beef can take place.
Yeah, and even like on a linear technical like assessment of the chart, just looking at the lower of the chart being Mercury, and Mercury's like about to bang crash right into Mars, so that's even more like speaking to the wartime energy there in the beef, and it is like chatty too. It's like talking shit, and then the beef pops off,
Right.
Yeah. So that's very apt. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks very dramatic. Looks like a party. One of the things that I have been thinking with all this Leo stuff is that I think is really interesting is, so we've got these planets, Mars and Venus especially, who are in Leo and who hit this square to Uranus and Taurus. And so Mars square Uranus, to my mind, is like ready to fuck shit up. This is like in a hurry, right? This is like ready to break things and all of that, and ready to do it over pride or over territory or any, like it doesn't take that much for this Mars to get into some shit. And then Venus is right there as well. And so what I was thinking about when I was like looking at this and sort of like trying to generate images for it, is I was thinking about Mars and Venus hanging out together and being ready to like charge into war together. And then as they do, they like hit this Uranus situation, and then something unexpected happens. And Mars almost doesn't notice. Mars is like out here doing super strong Mars, blow the shit up kind of things. And Mars is like looking forward toward the next thing. And Mars just moves right into Virgo. Whereas Venus, on the other hand, is going to be like, hold on a second. Right. Does it? Ooh, wait a minute. Maybe I need to turn around. And Mars almost doesn't even notice until Mars is in Virgo and like about to oppose Saturn, and then looks around and it's like, oh, Venus isn't here anymore, right? And so just like that was the idea that I had in my head, like riding into battle, and then Venus has to turn around and do some other things. What are you thinking about all this? Pallas, I know you've been working on a workbook around Venus and Leo, or the Venus retrograde in Leo. You are now famous for these workbooks. We all loved the last one as well. And so would you tell us a little bit about what's going on here?
Yeah, it actually comes out on solstice. So it should be just about to come out, or when So yeah, the squares between Jupiter and Uranus, I think, are kind of framing the whole thing. And of course, that brings in the squares with all the planets as they go through Leo, like Venus, Mars, the Sun, and Mercury all move through Leo during this next bit. And I was just, before like thinking about all of that, I was just thinking about how like there is echoes of this to the last time Mars was in Leo, which was summer of 2021. And so that was like the height of Saturn-Uranus squares, and all the planets moving through Leo were we're making that T-square between Saturn and Uranus. And it's just like thinking of like the amount of upheaval that was happening there, but the amount of crackdown that was happening on that upheaval, right? And so there's like a different relationship happening here with that Mars. So it's like things that Mars in Leo was potentially trying to accomplish 2 years ago. It's like now Saturn's not there in the square. And it's like, what will this Mars Uranus look like without the Saturn influence there? That feels like part of that question.
If there was a labor struggle going on for the past several years, then this seems like a moment to really hit that in a big way. I feel like the authorities are not in position to quell that rebellion in the way that they had been.
Yeah, which has been happening in France. So that makes total sense. And I'm more interested now to like see how that story continues to unfold there with all that you just said, because that just checks out really strong.
Yeah,
especially
so interesting. No,
go for it.
Oh, I was gonna go Venus, so you go.
Sure. Well, just especially once we start seeing the Mars opposite to Saturn, Mars in Virgo opposite to Saturn and that happens around the same time as the Venus station, and when that happens, then Saturn, isn't super well resourced. Saturn's like got a sextile to Jupiter going on there, but Mars also benefits from a trine from Jupiter. Jupiter's not in a mood to like harm Mars in that moment. And so if Mars just sort of wants to fuck shit up, meanwhile, Mars's ruler, the ruler of Virgo, is in Leo with Venus at that moment as well, then that looks like Mars is well resourced for the fight, if we're going to, and also under this trine from Uranus in Taurus, this looks really good for a labor movement. It looks really good for sort of like undercutting authorities.
Yeah, so this Mars opposite Saturn is on July 20th, just to like place it for folks listening in terms of like the trajectory of the summer.
Sure.
Yeah, and if Mars is like running forward without Venus at that point, even if it has to make because it was running so fast, it like has to make these adjustments once it gets into Virgo, but it's still just like knocking shit over while it's making these adjustments. So that checks out. Like I like the way you frame that. That's like really beautiful, honestly.
Is this the station retrograde?
This is the Venus station, which happens to feature Mars opposite Saturn as well.
Yeah. This is a potent one, right? With that little ingress with the moon between Virgo and Libra there, and like thinking of Venus's own power in Virgo versus Libra. Yeah, I mean, this Venus retrograde Venus is in Leo for 5 months. Like she ingressed June 5th and she moves into Virgo with the moon on October 9th. Like it's our whole summer plus some. Before she's already hit the station degree once we get into the Cancer ingress. She hits it on the 19th, and then she doesn't station for another month. So we're looking at July 22nd here. So this is like just with that Mars Saturn opposition. So that, I mean, this is the beginning of it. And then she stations direct at the beginning of September 4th, which is also like a pretty big day. And then she's not out of her like shadow until like October 7th, because then she moves right into Virgo. And so it's like, it's not just that Venus is in Leo for all this time. It's that she's in either her like retrograde, she's in a retrograde shadow, or she is retrograde like this whole time.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things about that is that this Venus in Leo is going to be making aspect to Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus the whole time. Do you have thoughts about that?
Oh, it's just huge. It's like setting off these bigger storylines. It's like Uranus and Taurus, right? We've already mentioned that since 2018. It's like all these changes people are undergoing in their in their Uranus house, and just generally we can see it in Taurus. And then having that with Jupiter having moved into there very recently. And so it's like Saturn having moved out of Aquarius, giving this like Uranus Taurus some breathing room with, or some freedom that it hasn't had in the last couple of years. And then with Jupiter moving in, like I'm sort of thinking about that as like fertilizer, right? For like the Uranus changes that are happening. And then to have all these planets in Leo, including Venus, coming into this square where Jupiter and Uranus are in Taurus in this overcoming square to all the Virgo planets, or to all the Leo planets. And then, but with Jupiter and Uranus both answering to Venus, right? So I'm thinking of this Jupiter as kind of like emissary, but like rogue emissary, because of course Venus during her retrograde starts move. She's setting as an evening star in the sky, and she stations retrograde and moves towards the horizon fast, and then she becomes invisible, and she's invisible for about for like just over a week, and then she comes out the other side as a morning star, and then like slowly rises. And so it's this peak moment of Venus's cycle that is hitting off this like newly this like slowing down where Jupiter is in Jupiter's cycles, like approach like super bright in the sky, like above us when the sun rises, like but like answering to Venus still, you know. So kind of like Jupiter and Taurus is sort of like on his own mission, but like not really paying attention to who he's like supposed to be serving a little bit. It's like how that kind of feels to me. And it's playing out in people's charts in their Taurus and their Leo houses.
It feels like yeah, that's an interesting way to think about that, because Jupiter is overcoming all that Leo stuff and is super high in the sky in the sunrise moment, which is when we'll start to see Venus as well. And so because of that overcoming position, it sort of gives Jupiter a kind of leeway, an ability to do whatever he wants to do a little bit. And so what kind of things does Jupiter want to do to this Venus retrograde, you think?
I mean, I'm seeing like a lot of softening, just because they are both benefics, right? And they're not particularly dignified, but they're not having much trouble.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm seeing some like or how I'm thinking about it is some like collapsing of significations between those houses, right? And then pulling in those placements too, which is like not always good, right? It's like you don't always want like whatever house is your Leo house and whatever house is your Taurus house, because they're square in your natal chart, right? If you're using whole sign houses, you don't always want those like so wrapped up in together in this kind of like soft, less boundaried kind of way. And so I'm seeing people like otherwise disparate areas of their lives, like the connections between them and the sort of like enmeshment of them is coming like a little too close, it feels like. And with Saturn and Pisces, not really helping, I don't think, answering to that Jupiter. And Leo's all about the heart. So it's like, yeah, a complicated story of the depths of one's heart hit off. And this is that individual versus collective burden, right? Thing. And it's like the Venus retrograde, I think, is this moment. If Venus is following Mars and then is like, oh shit, and has to turn around, it's probably partially because she like forgot something that is like, how do we not only move into Pluto and Aquarius time, but like, how do we actually carry like our heart into it still? Like, how do we not sacrifice it for the sake of whatever we are being tasked or called to do?
Yeah, I love that relationship between self and collective. I think that's like really the thing here, because where Leo is so very much about the star and the heart. Jupiter is very much about holding space. That's like how, like, Jupiter has his joy in the 11th, right? This is Jupiter wants there to be a kind of like space for togetherness, and Jupiter will want to see the big picture. Jupiter will see the forest rather than any individual tree, right? Or if Jupiter is gonna look at a tree, then Jupiter will notice, and which Jupiter in Taurus is gonna look at trees, right? Jupiter in Taurus will notice that a tree by itself is an ecosystem, is home to many, is not a singular organism, but rather is many all by itself. And that Jupiter is going to notice that the roots are as deep as the tree is tall, and this kind of thing, right? So Jupiter is going to notice that it's very like, I contain multitudes, right? While Venus is going through this retrograde, it's tumultuous. There's this like, we can think about the Persephone hanging out in the field, chilling, doing beautiful princess things, and then the ground opens up and a ravine like sort of sucks her in. Then she has to like go through this whole tumultuous, heartbreaking event, right? Through the distance from her mother, perhaps, or through the having to engage ugly things or whatever it is. And that one of the things that I'll often talk to clients about whenever I talk about Venus retrograde is like a reevaluation of some sort. Like, what really matters to you? What are your values? And how are you going to make sure that those things are a priority to you? And how have you been demonstrating what actually your priorities are, rather than what you've been saying they are, and this kind of thing as well, right?
Yeah, and when you want to hold space, like you were saying with the Jupiter and Taurus, when you want to create a solid foundation to hold space, oftentimes people come with that idea or that orientation, and then they have to like take a step back and be like, wait, hold on, how am I actually taking care of myself? What do I actually value here? That's beyond just like this expansive idea of like, I want to hold space for everybody, because especially in Taurus, it's like, take your time with it. Because it's like that expansion needs to have its like strong roots and foundation so it can grow into something substantial, but you can't leave yourself out in it. So like, what is like your relationship to your heart and like your creativity and your joy and your happiness and your radiance? And you can't actually hold space that's foundationally helpful if you're not tapping into that. So that like reevaluation is like really important throughout that whole process, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if Mars is getting carried away with itself. And that's what I was looking to, like when Mars gets into Virgo, I was like thinking about how like Virgo can have this energy of particularity and like just like letting myself roam free until it gets to Virgo, and then being really particular and being really precise about how I need to change direction really quickly so that I can like make sure that I'm taking care of like my inner sanctum and my review and reflection of what's going on in the heart space, and also what I want to create, because I do want to create. I want to hold space, but I do want to create for myself as well. And hopefully that'll go out into the world, but it is something that's just like, actually, I value this. I want this. And if I don't get that, then I also can't hold space that's foundationally sufficient and sustainable.
The Leo Aquarius axis in a nutshell, for sure. That
and not just Leo Aquarius.
Collective, and then
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Totally. Or just that pull toward the collective, but then that tending to the Leo parts of it.
Yeah, and it's not just Leo and Aquarius, but also once Mars moves into Virgo, then the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, who is still there in Leo. So So there's this precision and this particularity that Mars suddenly becomes extremely focused on, especially in opposition to the big, like, it's all the one thing kind of, like a New World Order sort of situation that's going on with Saturn there in Pisces, right? And Mars is kind of like very particular in looking at the details and this kind of thing. ready to fight that Saturn, ready to oppose that Saturn, right? But the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, and Mercury is hanging out in Leo with Venus. And so going through this heart thing and finding out what matters to me as a person is such an integral part of the process of Mars's opposition to Saturn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Part of the way I'm framing this retrograde too is that, like, because it's like, yeah, okay, Venus is in Leo, and like people don't talk about Venus and Leo that much. It's like only when she's retrograde there, and that's every 8 years, right? And then every 4 years she has like a conjunction there when she's direct. But it's like Venus and Leo doesn't get that much attention, and so I feel like some people don't necessarily know what to do with it for this long. But part of the key for me is that, like, think like the sun is, or the ruler of a Venus retrograde is always basically as important as the Venus retrograde happening. And so thinking about the sun throughout this time is really key. But also every single one of our Venuses has an intimate relationship with the sun, right? It's like Venus and the sun synodic cycle is incredibly important, incredibly complex and beautiful. I mean, it's really elegant and simple once you understand it, but getting in there is like, can be a little bit tricky. But it's like thinking about Venus and the sun's relationship in our own chart, and like how that relationship is then, we're witnessing it play out in this way that the sun has obviously a lot of power in Leo, right? Venus, not so much, but Venus has Jupiter over there. It's like doing a lot of like Venusian stuff. And it's like, so this is as much as we're examining our own Venus at this time, it's all of this stuff about like connecting with our own sun as well. And like, when Venus is in, especially that time she's invisible, and she's invisible another point in her cycle for longer, for like 50 days, between when she's in a morning star and evening star. And so these periods that she's invisible, like thinking about this, like this kind of underworld story, right? Like I'm thinking about, for this specific one, because it's Leo, because it has to do with the sun, I'm thinking about like St. John of the Cross. I'm thinking about like Dark Night of the Soul, but like not in the way it's been kind of popularly taken up, but in the way that it's like how to, the point is like union with the divine, right? It's not like the absence of it and finding like our own faculties. It's like, oh, this like sacrifice and disconnection is essential in order for us to like be in a state, like a mystic state, in which we can like even come to the divine. And so there's like a piece of that in everyone's Venus retrograde process. And I feel like that also brings us into this like more mystical Virgo, Pisces, Mars, Saturn aspect too. It's like when we get, it's like we get particular in certain pieces, and like how that expresses while still holding on to ourself through that process.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And so as we move forward through that whole situation, then Mars hits this opposition to Saturn, and then continues to trod onward, doing Mars things there in Virgo. And then Mercury moves into Virgo as well to hang out there with Mars. And then we see a very similar sort of situation where Mercury is catching up to that Mars, and then they start to roll together for a second. And then both of them hit this trine to Uranus. And then Mercury is like, hold up, I gotta head back. I gotta do some other stuff. I gotta see what's, like I forgot something. I gotta reorder some things. I gotta go say what's up to Saturn another time, something like this, right? How are you guys feeling about this Mercury retrograde and its relationship to Mars and this kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm loving how you like framed that, like both of them are catching up and then have to go back, because it's like, for me, it's just like inviting people to look at like where they are, like being so excessively spontaneous, because they're gonna have to go back in their relationships, and they're gonna have to go back with like just like how they're thinking about things moving forward. Because it's like you're gonna keep moving forward, but I need to like go back into my heart and feel into that with the Venus. And then here with Mercury, it's like I need to actually like reorganize like how I'm living my life in a day-to-day kind of way to make sure that what I'm doing with this Mars is not like burning me out or is like sustainable. And so that's kind of like what I'm feeling into with this experience. And then for me, I'm also just like in my mind, I was like, I can't remove myself from feeling into how close the nodes are in a square with Pluto. And so there's these other deep underlying things that are happening that people are like going back and forth with, because when there's a square to the nodes, people talk about, some people call it a skip step. I don't really like that orientation. I'm always like mindful around how the way we speak about astrology is our own mental projection. So to me, it's just like having a checklist and making sure that you like know that you might have to hop around the checklist instead of being so linear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like all this stuff done. Well, even thinking about that Mars going really fast and then these other planets going retrograde, it's like I'm getting stuff done, but I'm moving so quickly that I need to like go back a little bit and make sure that I like gather all the things that I need before in the long term Pluto goes back into Aquarius, but also just like with the houses that these placements are in with the Venus and with the Mercury, making sure that I have everything organized and reevaluated because I'm moving so fast with the Mars.
Yeah, the shift between like the planets in Leo squaring Jupiter and Uranus, and then the planets in Virgo being in like trine to Jupiter and Uranus feels like a key part of that too, in terms of this like, okay, we've hit these, I mean, squares to Uranus, right? It's like disruptive obstacles. We've hit these, and then they get into Virgo, and it's like, okay, but we can't be Leo about this. We have to be Virgo about this in order to kind of manage that like Uranian, Jupiterian energy and kind of like influx of that. And then like Mercury coming through and being like, okay, let's like make sure we have this before we move on.
I feel like that Mercury is very concerned about accuracy. And Mars is not. Mars hits that trine to Uranus and then keeps on pushing and then hits this opposition to Neptune. So I feel like, you know, Mars kind of gets this feeling of like, can't nobody keep up with me. I got this. I'm handling my business. I just had a good fight with Saturn where like Mars was looking good. Saturn maybe couldn't handle all of Mars's heat in that moment. And so like Mars is like starting to feel himself, and Venus can't keep up and Mercury can't keep up, and I got this. And then we get this opposition to Neptune, and it starts to feel a little bit like trigger happy or something, right? Like I just am feeling myself so much that maybe accuracy isn't as important as just continuing to fire. Whereas Mercury starts to be like, hold on a second here, homie. Like there's let's reevaluate, or like let's refocus. Let's make sure that we're looking at the right things here, that we're looking at all the right details, that we are clear about what's going on here. And that's been one of the problems with a dignified Mercury, and is really a problem with a dignified I like keep looking for like Mercury electional charts. Like I want a nice Mercury piece to I spent a bunch of time talking on camera and stuff like this. I would love a good Mercury piece, but now every time Mercury is dignified, then there's a square or opposition to Saturn, which is immediately followed by a square or opposition to Neptune, which is really tough on Mercury precision and you know, like thinking about like facts and what even am facts, and what does it mean to know things or to be related to truth in some kind of way. You know, one of the things that I mentioned on Twitter recently is that I have a Twitter. Don't follow my Twitter. It's I don't care. But I kind of like that no one listens to me there. But one of the things that I said was that, especially, you know, we've got this whole, so Pluto in Aquarius has been like associated with AI and all this kind of the explosion in AI and all this. But like, I think one of the things that sort of gets left out of that conversation of like, is it going to be a super intelligence? Does it know more things than we do, or whatever, is the idea of epistemology, like the way that someone comes into a state of knowing something, is really important. Like there are ways to know things that are built out of things that are more than what we might think of as like facts exactly, or something mathematical or something like this. There's a feelings component, there's a breath component, there's like a visceral olfactory component to knowing something that is important here, and that can be really confusing. And so as I've been looking at this Mercury, who has to navigate not only Saturn but also Neptune, it feels like synesthetic to me. It feels like wires getting crossed in the neurology, and sort of like coming up with different ways of understanding things, and then maybe being confused by those different ways of understanding things.
Yeah. And I love that tweet. That tweet was epic. You know, it's like, I'm all about that. And yeah,
you were the one who liked it. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's really, I'm just reflecting anyway, so I don't really have much to add, but I love that reflection. Yeah.
My Twitter is a Leo rising, and so I've been like thinking, I've been really wanting to like go back there for the Venus retrograde, but I'm also like, I did a poll on my Instagram asking people, and it was overwhelmingly no, save yourself.
Sure.
But I mean, of course, that's people on Instagram. So anyway, but this makes me want to go back. Yeah, so the last Mercury retrograde that was in this opposition also didn't quite make it, but it was into that summer of 2016, which was like, it was the Saturn Neptune square, and it's like Jupiter was in Virgo. It was like a whole bunch of stuff going on. But one of the things I remember about that summer, I mean, I remember a lot of things about that summer, to be clear, but like Pokemon Go was like such a huge thing. That was kind of like peak that. And so there's just like thinking, I mean, that's a Saturn Neptune phenomenon to me, but it feels also very like Mercury Neptune, this sort of like not just communication, but perception, and like how perception of communication happens.
Sure.
And yeah, there's all this like VR, whatever stuff happening to you, and it just feels kind of, itchy in that way.
Yeah, that's also like Donald Trump taking hold. And so that's when we get the term alternative facts and this kind of thing showing up. And so like the idea of like what even am truth really starts to come into the forefront in that moment. So this looks like a really good revisitation of that.
What's also curious about this too is that like Mercury actually stations at 21 degrees, and
just
so
right there.
doesn't actually make it to Neptune. So it's like approaching that and then like going back and like fact checking, right? But then of course right after the retrograde then it's like, I thought we were going to avoid this. Oh no, we did not avoid it.
Yeah, to me, that looks like Mercury noticing that Mars is starting to look a little reckless here and being like, hold on a second. Because it's like, it doesn't quite make the trine to Uranus either. It's like within a few minutes of making that trine to Uranus before like turning around and going back and checking on stuff. Meanwhile, Mars is just like rootin' tootin' out here, just like, we're doing a damn thing. Shoot first, ask questions later.
Yeah, and then Mars hits Uranus, then Neptune, then Pluto. And so, yeah, just on a personal level, I feel like there's a lot of potential yumminess that people can like really access there. It's like, even if you just wrote down like from the time that Mars hits Uranus to the time Mars goes out of Virgo, like in what ways have you been just moving forward and letting your unconscious processes just run the show? And like, how can you go back and change your mind so that you can like have that accuracy to understand it before Mercury comes back to that Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and like move forward out of that space? That's one thing that I would say is like would be like a really diligent thing to do in that time space. Yeah.
Well, there's just huge thunder here. Oh, my poor pup. I should probably go check on her. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of this Mars stuff too, and this whole like Mars is actually nearing in November, we'll have like the Cazimi with the sun. So we've been in a period of, so autumn 2021, we had the Mars Cazimi was in Libra. And this coming one, it's in Scorpio. So we've been in like a Mars Libra whole cycle, basically. And so coming in November, we get Mars coming together with the sun in Scorpio. And so it's like feels like we're just heading into a whole different vibe. But this is also, in terms of Mars's cycle with the sun, like coming together. And so this is sort of like the final square phase, if we're kind of thinking about it in a phase way. And so there is like we got to do it now. Like anything we didn't get done previously in the cycle, it's like needs to happen in between this like Mars through Leo, through Virgo, and then it's like back in Libra, where it was 2 years ago when it got burned up in the sun, right? And it gets through Libra and then burns up in the sun in Scorpio, and it's like reborn there. And that's like, I mean, Mars and Libra and Mars and Scorpio are just such a different Mars. So it's like interested to see how the kind of level of potency and action is like generally more viable, like after this like last run of Mars we get.
That's kind of in keeping with the feeling that I had before as well about Mars just kind of like blazing forward, like doesn't give a shit about whatever else is going on here. Like I've got things to do and I'm doing those things. And even if I'm shooting at the wrong target sometimes, even if I get confused about things, even if others think that maybe we should be like looking back and seeing what's going on, still I have forward business to do. And so I'm going to take care of that sort of stuff. That's interesting it's interesting to think about, because this like one of the main themes this year, I think, is this kind of juxtaposition of Mars dynamics versus Venus dynamics. So like toward the beginning of the year, we had eclipses. We had 2 sets of eclipses in Mars signs, right? So we had a Scorpio eclipse and we had an Aries eclipse. And both of those are ruled by Mars. Then in the later half of the year, then we've got an eclipse in Libra and an eclipse in Taurus. And so both of those are ruled by Venus. And so we've got this Venus retrograde, right? And that Venus retrograde is strongly colored by a conjunction to Mars. And so it feels like much of the theme of the year that we've got going on here is that dynamic between Venus and Mars. So that's likely to feel, so there we've got the whole like gods of war situation going on here. We've got a sort of whenever I think about Venus and Mars, I think about like passions a lot. There's this sense of like desire and yearning and longing and this kind of thing. So Mars is on the sort of pursuant side of desire, where Venus tends to be on the attractive side of desire. But both of those things are like, it's like 2 sides of the same coin here a little bit. And so it feels like navigating that, and that in that heart space, in that personal space, in that space where passions can get inflamed and all this kind of thing, in that sort of area, it seems like that's kind of the primary stage for much of the drama that takes place, not only this summer, but also like in 2023 as a whole.
Yeah, I'm already seeing that play out. Go ahead, Pallas.
Oh, and just like that Venus-Mars conjunction doesn't happen until February.
Right.
February at 6 degrees of Aquarius, which is so right in that first bit of Aquarius too. It's like that's a long time for them to chase each other and not have any aspect. They're just chasing each other. They don't square, they don't sextile, they don't anything until that moment. And that is like a odd length of time for them to not actually even make an aspect. So it is a slow burn, this conjunction.
A very will they, won't they?
Mm. Mm.
Cool. So I feel like we have sort of hit most of the things that we talked about that we talked about hitting in our pre-chat here. Is there anything sort of like big picture, tie it up? Is there anything, any images that you wanted to make sure that came through?
Yeah, I was curious, like what both of y'all's reflection was on just even on like a broader scale. So we talked about anyway, yeah. So the fixity and then the mutability, or like the, you know, the back and forth, and like how are y'all framing that throughout this period of time with the planets going through like the fixed signs and the mutable signs?
I feel like I'm still recovering from like all of the cardinal stuff, like in 2019, 2020. Like I feel like the fixed, like the big fixed stuff we went through, like more recently, is like I don't know how much, and I'm not just speaking for myself here, but it feels like this retrograde is in part kind of like delayed processing of stuff. Yeah. And you're already kind of seeing it socially, right? Of people being like, oh, wow, what happened, right? What happened there? It's like, where are we now? Like after all that stuff, like the Saturn, Uranus and everything associated. And so I feel like that's part of it. And whatever's happening in the mutable stuff feels like the last, I don't know, the Saturn in Pisces with Neptune in Pisces, and like this is kind of the countdown until they both enter Aries and we're back in like a very strange cardinal land, right? And so I think the mutable stuff is, and it's interesting that we pulled out 2016 because that was also Saturn in Sag, right? So that was like whatever we were going through, whatever Saturn transit, and we were just talking about this, whatever Saturn transits we were going through in 2016, 15, 16 with Saturn and Sag, those are now at their square with Saturn and Pisces, right? And so that's like, we're picking up on these older themes and kind of regrouping, I guess, in like all of these areas of our life before this, like 2 years from now, when Saturn, Neptune then move into Aries and things look different.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, one thing that makes me think of, and especially in the way that you were talking about delayed processing as part of what Venus retrograde in Leo in this fixed sign has to say, that to me feels like even if you knew in 2019 and 2020 that we were not going to go back to normal, it's, even if you knew that intellectually, it's hard to know that in an embodied way, and it's hard to know what might happen, like what a new normal might be or something like this. And since fixed signs are really about that kind of longer lasting stability or something like this, or longer lasting instability in this case perhaps, then this to me looks like kind of coming to terms with that and being like, oh, okay, so this is what we're doing now. And it potentially makes less sense than it made before, right? Because when we had that Saturn in Capricorn and Aquarius, the rules were very clear. You know, maybe you liked the rules, maybe you hated the rules, but they were very clear no matter which side of those rules you were on. It was very well understood. Whereas now Saturn isn't in that kind of position anymore. And meanwhile, Uranus is still kind of running amok a little bit. And there's this sense of like, so now kind of anything is possible. Like all the deep fakes are possible, and all of the like what even am information and this kind of thing, right? Like narrative and story. Like one of the things that happened to me is Gordon White came on my show and was like, just assume that if it's on the news, assume that most of it is a lie, and you'll do better than chance if you start there. And so then thinking with that kind of ideas about information, it's like, I don't even know what verified information even looks like. Like, I don't know how to believe anything here. And so if that's true, then am I just going to generate all my own truth, or like what's going to happen here, right? And so there's been this like deeply felt confusion that I don't think is only felt in my body. I think that that's a wider spread phenomenon. And so this Venus retrograde here, as well as this Mercury retrograde, which is going to be so concerned with fact verification and maybe alternative facts and whatever else, right? That feels like this. It feels like a way to sit in that soup of like confusion or disarray or something like that, and be like, oh, okay, this is where we live now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that like AI influence on that information too feels like something that's just going to be more and more of a topic. And that also kind of brings in the Saturn, Pisces, collective individual, Pluto, like Leo Aquarius story too. It's like, how much do we have to know? Like, how much do we really have to know for the sake of our lives? Like when you were talking about that, what Gordon said, I was like, I miss a local newspaper. It's like where I live right now, the local newspaper is actually pretty good. Where I grew up, the local newspaper was like one of the like longest independent ones, until like it eventually got bought out, but it was like, it held on. It held on to like its local writers and stuff. And so I don't know. I'm just like thinking about that. And it's like, who's behind it. They live in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but also I love some world news. Like I do, like I grew up on it. It's like it's an important part of my life. With, all of the like educated skepticism of it all, even then it's still like an important part of my life, and my feeling of being connected to others comes through that like almost like hyper aware global connection and like awareness. And so it's like, what does it do when we can't trust that? What does that do to like our sense of global connectivity when so much of it we can't necessarily trust, right? And it's so mediated, just like more and more mediated. I just think about getting smaller, and that's such a Pluto thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And like lately, even like teams that I'm on, like they have projects, like the main structure is we don't know what the hell is going on yet. That's actually the structure of what we're doing. It's like we don't know what's happening yet, but we're about to move in that direction. So I find that to be like a really helpful orientation, because that is what feels actually solid right now. And so people want to change the relationship with their idea of solid for sure. But like, that's what I'm seeing is like solid here lately. And also like what you were saying, Pallas, like for me, whenever I think about things changing and things being mutable, or things being fixed, like fixed change that is unstable, and like the mutability of things that are happening like more on like a smaller scale, I just go down the street to this one spot that I always go to, and I just notice how it's still that spot down the street that I go to. And so like this like large thing that's changing and everything's unstable and oh my God. And it's like, yeah, like the plants are different this year. Actually, I did notice that. So that was different, but that's not unstable. That's just like a flux that's happening on a micro scale. But, you know, everything's fine. You know, there's still deer over there. The blackberry bushes are still over there. I still meditate over there, still go and cry over there when I need to. Like, it's still happening. So it's like, even like being mindful of like what we think we need to know, like you're saying, it's like so big. And it's like, and also as humans, are we even made to like be able to handle that quite yet? It's like, I don't even think we've adapted that far. You know, that's one of the things that's creating the instability in and of itself. But that's like a whole other conversation. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about when I hear you go into that. Yeah.
Definite. I feel like definitional of humans is like biting off more than we can chew generally. A lot of fucking around.
And a bit of finding out as well, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt
good though. No, it's good. It's good to talk with you guys always.
For sure. One thing that I think we can maybe leave off with here is the great grandmother Ursula Le Guin said one time that all truth is local. And so this, I think, speaks very directly to the tenuous balance that we've been talking about this whole time, striking a balance between the personal, the interior, the heart, versus the widespread, the community, the world, those dynamics. And the tree is a good metaphor for one person, and the person, I mean in not only human persons, right, but every person, every entity, or every individual who exists also contains multitudes at all times, right? And so there's this relationship between the singular and the everyone that we are navigating in this moment, and we are perhaps navigating that through the heart space. And the heart, I think, one thing that I always go back and talk to clients about is, I mentioned that, like, follow your heart. Your heart knows what it really wants. Your heart knows what's really true, right? And in order to establish some kind of truth, then it's got to come in contact with the heart in some kind of way. And that is a tremendously local phenomenon. We can think about the way that the heart, for example, generates an electromagnetic field, which is around 12 feet in diameter, 6 feet as a radius from your body, right? So that is the area that you can feasibly like get a hold of or get some understanding of, right? And so that is a tremendously localized area in space and time. And so what does that mean? And there's a wide open question here around that I think that we're going to navigate all season.
Yeah.
So with that as our... Oh, yes, go for it.
Oh, I was going to ask Cameron if he had any heart advice for people going through this Venus retrograde, but only like...
Excellent question.
I hope you like have some kind of like bigger offering about that, but in this moment.
Yeah, totally. So there's this thing that happens or has happened in the past where I program, like during different transits, I program different things in different energy centers in my body. And so the thing that I was like looking forward to cultivating the most was like having a more dynamic relationship with the rose that exists in my heart, because I have a rose in my heart. And so just like inviting people into like the environment, the local environment that is the heart space for yourself. And like, what are the images that exist there? What are the colors? What are the sounds? What are the animals? What is the texture? What is the flavor? What is the scent? And just like being able to drop into your heart, and doing that like over and over and over again through the 40-day process of the cycle, because they consider it to be an alchemical month. And so to go into the inner sanctum throughout that time and allow the purification process to like really show you like where did you start with that process in your heart, and where are you going to end up with that process in your heart? And through that, like all these things around like information, or what is this, what is that, what's happening, you know, all those things start to just like be purified and like cleanse themselves away. And so that's the offering that I would have. That's what I'm going to be doing personally. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
Yeah, that connects to part of what I'm thinking about too, in terms of like, and like the dark night of the soul piece too is like prayer, right? Feels like really potent medicine, which absolutely like real, like prayer comes out of that space, right? And so that like
and usually
as
anguish.
a practice. Yeah. Which, yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing too I would invite people into if they do go attempt to go through that process or go through the process. Of course you can reach out, but also just knowing like in processes like that, like anguish, grief, sadness must come up so that the heart can like truly express itself and show you the environment that actually should be existing there. So that's just a really important thing, because, you know, I feel like when I was saying it, it sounded poetic, which it might sound nice, but it's like actually like I've been like in fetal position doing stuff like that too. So it's like, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Heart openers. Like cracking.
Yeah. Also, something else that I could offer people just as an idea or reflection is understanding, and this from a medical astrology perspective, understanding how to be able to like relax the body, Venus, to actually allow the cardiovascular system to move. Because we live in a culture in which we stress ourselves out to get the cardiovascular system to move. But we can actually relax into like having our cardiovascular system move. So just simple things like standing up on your tiptoes and then relaxing, or just like giving yourself a massage and just like feeling the blood move through the cardiovascular system. So just like understanding we don't have to stress ourselves out for the cardiovascular system to move. And Venus is going to be in Leo for a really long time. So it's going to be a long period of time where we can kind of play with that idea, right? And I would use that Mars as like a trial and error process, rather than like we've been saying this whole time, it's just like running forward and like other things are reviewing. But it's like while it's going through Leo, just like, oh, what does that do? What does that do? What does that do with your cardiovascular system? And then like as it leaves, you know, you can like start to like be more particular about how you're learning how to relax the cardiovascular system. And again, you can reach out if that's too vague for you, if you want to actually go through that process. But those are things that I already have written down for myself to like work on more. Yeah.
So if a person who is listening wanted to reach out to you, where would they go?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram at cadream6. They can find me at my website at www.cadreamplanet.com. And my email address is cadreamplanet@gmail.com, which if you do have a question specifically pertaining to anything in this conversation, I would invite you to email me so that can be like more intimate in a container, because now I'm good at my emails. So yeah, I'm trying to centralize everything there.
Hard one. Good work.
For sure. Awesome. So I have no doubt that folks are going to be emailing you and getting readings and all of the rest of that. Now, Pallas, I know that you have been working on a Venus retrograde workbook and many things. I don't know if you're like, are you selling it? Are you able to make money again? Like, what's going on? Tell us all of the things.
I am officially a permanent resident, and I can make money.
Holler.
Thank God. Thank you. I mean, you know, it's complicated, like leaving Canada now. I don't know. But whatever. So I'm here, and Where is Your Heart? No, that's the name of the Venus retrograde workbook. So it will be out on solstice. I'm really active on Instagram at this point, which is, I actually just changed it to Pallas K Augustine. I'm not 9 wands there anymore. I'm Pallas K Augustine, author style. But I'm going to be.
Are there any dots in the Pallas K Augustine thing?
No,
okay.
No dots. I'm tired of saying dots. So I'll be making a lot of like free content there too for people through the release. Just like my Patreon at this point gets kind of like preview drafts. So they already have a lot of the Venus and Leo retrograde content, research and writing that informs the workbook that's going to be released. And they have even more access to that stuff. And then the Patreon also supports me in being able to create more of this like in-depth educational free content, which is cool. And then with the other thing, the next Idola Stellarum collection also releases on solstice. We're just doing it all at once. So that's our second collection of astromagical talismanic jewelry. And so that's at Idola Stellarum on Instagram or .com. And we have Inner Sanctum, which is like our new membership offering. Will be closed probably. It closes on the 18th, so it's probably by the time. But that's how you get early access to the talismans in the future, to the collection. And yeah, the last one sold out. And I'm excited for people to connect with these ones because it's also a really special collection. And I'm excited to see how it ends up in the world.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm sure I'm looking forward to seeing all of that unfold. I know that it's going to be great. And I've heard such nice things about Idola Stellarum in general. So I'm very excited to see how what the next collection looks like and how it feels and all of that. That's going to be super great. If you want to check out ZamboniFunk things, I'm sorry, what? Somebody? No? Okay. Well,
that if you want the thunder.
I see. Yes. Well, we give thanks to the thunder and the rains. Jupiter, the god of thunder, has been lovely to me recently. He had a big influence on my ability to get a team together to make this video. I just recently released a video of my band playing music. So that is available for free on YouTube. Please check that out. Leave a little comment, leave a flame emoji, leave a heart emoji, leave a shit emoji if that's what you think about it. I don't care. Let me know what you think about it, because I just sent it to my my music teachers earlier and got roasted about it. So I know, but all the same, I am very proud of what's been going on. I'm very proud of the music that I've been able to create. I've got a bunch of new music coming out over the summer as well, so make sure and follow me on Spotify, Tidal, Pandora, Apple Music, wherever you like to find your music at. Check me out in those places. You will also be able to find an electional report on Patreon. So if you want to time things, maybe you've got your own artistic launches or product launches, or maybe you want to schedule a first date or something like that. One time I didn't elect a first date and it went super trashy, and then I elected the next first date and it went way better. So who knew that electional astrology works? Not this guy who has been doing it for years. So you'll be able to find all that on the Patreon. You also get early access to the podcasts so not only is this music video that we did a live performance of the music, but also there's a documentary to go along with it. And so that will be, we're like shopping that around to film festivals and all this kind of stuff right now. So we're a ways away from the release for that. But if you'd like an early access to that, then the Patreon will be the place to get that. You can also get a reading. You can get a 10-minute reading where I do what I do for the weeklies, but I do that for you specifically. That's available in the store section of my website. You can also find merch there. You can find stuff like a mug with the painting of Can't Help Myself on it, or a shirt, or and that's got Breathe on there, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's coming out. I am super excited about it. Thank you so much for checking out this, for checking out ZamboniFunk.com, idolastellarum.com, cadreamplanet.com. Thank you for hanging out with us to do these quarterly forecasts. I'm so very excited that we are continually able to do this, and it's something fun and educational for all of us. So thank you all so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time. Bye.